Holy shit. Robot ninjas. Ninjas that are robots! Now that I got that out of my system, let's talk about Ninja Warriors, one of the true overlooked classic brawlers. Developed by Natsume, the makers of Wild Guns, Ninja Warriors is a superb action game on the Super Nintendo, and one that even I didn't know about until a few months ago. On the surface, it can appear very shallow and simple, but it is actually one of the deepest brawlers I've ever played. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is simple in a very pick-up-and-play kind of way, but the brilliance of Ninja Warriors lies in this simple approach to the traditional brawler. It is only one player, it is completely linear, and most importantly, there is only one plane of movement. So none of this, or that, or this. But trust me, the geniuses at Natsume knew what they were doing, because Ninja Warriors is one of the greatest and most unique brawlers ever made. And all that aside, it's got fucking robot ninjas! So right away, the most distinguishing thing about Ninja Warriors is the fact that the whole thing takes place on just one plane. And when you think about one plane beat-em-ups, you probably think Kung Fu, Altered Beast, China Warrior? But while those games were more about landing successful blows and reflexes, Ninja Warriors is more about landing successful combos and strategizing. Also, there aren't any platforming segments like in the Super Nintendo version of Batman Returns, Splatterhouse Parts 1 and 2, and the Super Nintendo version of Power Rangers, which was also made by Natsume, but that's for another time. Ninja Warriors is all about non-stop busting heads, and there are tons of ways to do it. There are 3 ninjas to choose from, each with different looks, speeds, and movesets. The first one is, if you can believe it, called Ninja. And he is the slow one, but he's a goddamn beast. Just look at the way he throws people around like they're nothing. And I like this. Since he weighs near a damn ton, just check out the way he jumps. Kunoichi is, no pun intended, the well-rounded character, and Kamaitachi is the weak but swift one. He's my favorite. Each of the ninjas have different speeds, throws, charges, combos, jump attacks, crouches. It's an impressive move list, especially when you consider you only have 2 buttons, jump and attack. It all depends on which direction you push, kinda like in Smash Bros. For example, each ninja has a different move for pushing down and jump, and different kinds of jump kicks depending on how you left the ground. Knowing and memorizing all your ninjas' moves is super easy, but crucial, because you're pretty limited on movement. You can't be everywhere at once, and you rarely have a moment to rest since there is an impressive range of enemies with a variety of stipulations. You have your basic one-hit kill goons, their slightly tougher counterparts, your long-range snipers who also throw grenades, your jump-happy, low-hitting Vega wannabes, these swift kabuki guys, heavy armored mechs that can only be hit from the back, and these big wrestler dudes that jump right back up the second you put them down. I won't spoil them for you, but suffice it to say the boss battles are just as impressive. And then there's the occasional environmental hazard, and there are plenty. But thankfully, explosions from grenades and missiles also hurt the bad guys too. And I make a point of saying this because this type of thing was pretty rare in the 8-bit and 16-bit days. Oh, and by the way, picking up a dirt bike and using it as a weapon is one of the most satisfying things you can do in an action game. Then there's the blaster meter. Your obligatory kill fuck everything move doesn't take a portion of your life like it does in most brawlers, and it also isn't collected like in Golden Axe. Your blaster meter fills on its own, and rather quickly I might add, but if you're knocked down while it's still filling, it resets to 0. Not hit, just knocked down, so watch out for enemy combos and mid-air counters. This adds a huge element of strategy to the game, because there are times when things get hectic and that meter couldn't fill fast enough, and then BAM! You're thrown down and now you got nothing. Now I know what some of you were thinking, I'm just gonna take it easy and whore the blaster meter, right? Well, you may have unlimited continues, but only one life. And while at times a blaster meter can mean the difference between the next level and game over, the blaster meter isn't so much a kill-all, but more of an equalizer. It does damage, yeah, but more importantly, it puts everyone else down. It's like a clean slate. Sometimes in a good brawler, all you need is a moment to think. So you can't waste it, you really have to use it wisely. It kind of creates a risk-reward system that's an awful lot like the Vulcan cannon was in Wild Guns. God, these guys are good! And so, different ninjas with many different moves and the many different enemies and the many different environmental hazards, with the easy-to-lose, easy-to-gain blaster, all with unlimited continues but only one life, all crammed onto just one plane, makes Ninja Warriors one of the deepest, most unique, and greatest brawlers I've ever played. By restricting movement to one plane, Natsume was able to refine every aspect of the gameplay, making it far more strategic than your typical brawler. It's an experience so deep and brilliantly balanced that the absence of a two-player mode is forgiven, for me at least, because really, this game was built for a one-player experience. Yeah, it sucks it's only one player, but it just wouldn't work with two people without retooling everything, and then it might not have been as special as it is. So with action so satisfying, there's a bit lacking in the replay department. You got 8 stages, 3 ninjas, 2 difficulty levels, and it will take some practice to beat this game on hard, but I didn't notice anything different with the endings, and there really isn't any replay after that. There's not even an options menu, so no sound test this time, which is definitely a bummer. And like I mentioned earlier, I've only known about Ninja Warriors for a couple of months now. I bought it for $5 on a whim at my local retro shop. So not only was I shocked to find out that it was an amazing game, but that it also had a cool little history behind it. Natsume's Ninja Warriors on the Super NES is actually the sequel to Taito's original Ninja Warriors, which was first released in the arcades. The arcade version of Ninja Warriors is noteworthy for its cabinet size. It was one of 3 multi-screen games that Taito made for the arcade. One of these 3 games was actually the very first Darius game. And while the most widely known example of the multi-screen arcade machine is Konami's X-Men, Taito had him beat by like 6 years. But I don't know if this was the first example of the multi-screen thing, and I'm not here to talk about multi-screen arcade games. Let's get back to Ninja Warriors. Ninja Warriors was unlike most arcade machines because it had not 1, not 2, but 3 screens. But that's not the only thing that makes the Super Nintendo version vastly different from its arcade counterpart. The arcade version was also restricted to just one plane of movement, but was more akin to Kung Fu, in where most enemies take 1 or 2 hits. So it's more about landing successful blows to an oncoming swarm of enemies, and less about landing combos. You could only play as Kunoi Ishii and a blue male counterpart, and there was no blaster meter. Instead, you had a limited number of shurikens at your disposal. The arcade version was ported to many home computer systems, but more importantly to the TurboGrafx and Sega CD. Naturally, all versions had a very truncated perspective, fitting it onto one screen. However, the TurboGrafx, PC Engine port was only released in Europe, and the Sega CD port was only released in Japan. Oddly enough, the Sega CD, Mega CD, version included an entire prologue, subtitled in Japanese yet narrated quite terribly in English, called Zuntata. Though this was never released in North America, this English narration suggests that perhaps an American release was planned, but scrapped. It is considered to be the definitive port of the arcade version, due in part to its amazing soundtrack, which we're listening to right now. And by the way, Zuntata is not only the name of the band that performs this song, they were also Taito's in-house band, who were also responsible for the soundtracks of Bubble Bobble and the Darius games. But now what about this game? Well, it was developed by Natsume, not Taito, though they published it for Natsume, not unlike the first Lufia game. And like I said earlier, it's actually the sequel to the arcade game. However, in a rare act of logic, the terrible Japanese Super Famicom name, Ninja Warriors again, was graciously dropped. And instead of pulling a Goonies 2 or a Final Fantasy 2, they decided to just call it Ninja Warriors, not Ninja Warriors 2. Yes, it bears almost no resemblance to the arcade game of the same name, but at the time, nobody in North America knew this. And hey, it once again gives me the opportunity to tell you all about it. So in conclusion, nice bit of history for a fantastic action game. Not bad for something I picked up on a whim for $5. Alright friends, this brings us to the end of another episode. But before we reach for our wine, how about I reach for this? These are my brand new Wii points that I plan to spend on Mega Man 10. Yes, Mega Man 10 is coming out next month, and I'm pretty excited, though a little skeptical. I just want to let you know that I plan on making a video for Mega Man 10, but I'm not sure what exactly. I might not have that much to say about Mega Man 10, like I did with Mega Man 9. So I'll figure out what I'm going to do when the game actually comes out. I'm just letting you know now, so you don't email me a million times. Just don't email me, not even sarcastically. It's not funny. So until then, how about this? We got ninjas, we got Mega Man. What the fuck do you gotta be angry about, right? Cheers. Ah. Ninjas.